Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us on March 26th for our second webinar of 2019. On the phone, I'm Debbie Fawcett, and we have Susan Pittman. And lurking in the background, thank goodness, we have our technical assistant, Tico Henry, for today's presentation of Moving Up, Building Better Writing Skills. Again, this is something that we developed and for you based upon your comments from some of our previous webinars. So at this point in time, I would like to turn it over to my colleague, Susan Pittman, to get us started. Susan?
Okay, thank you, Debbie. And just so that you have an idea, I mean, we are always scattered out all over the place. I'm coming to you from North Carolina. Normally, Debbie would be down there in Louisiana, but instead, Debbie, where are you right now?
I am preparing to be in Mystic, Connecticut tomorrow. I'm in Stratford, Connecticut for a visit for the evening. So I'm up in Connecticut. So hope we have some folks from Connecticut on the line today.
Fantastic. And then, so what we'd like to know from everybody who's out there is how about listing your city and state and just put it into the question box. Those of you who have been with us before, if you look on the right-hand side on the dashboard, you'll see a little arrow that points toward the word question. Just open that up and let us know where you are. Oh my, I'm seeing Virginia and Kentucky, Michigan. Debbie, I see someone else is in Connecticut as well. Savannah.
Very
hello,
good.
Georgia. Utah. I'm so glad we have people who I know have to take kind of this extra time here as they're because of the time changes in different parts of the country itself. But I'm really glad. And we have someone from Washington State. Alessandra, hey, thank you very much for being with us. So we have people from just all over the place. We're really glad that you could join us today. And you can keep right on adding all of the, and I love it. Philippe goes, I am here. Well, where is here? So if you could just let us know. Oh, thank you, Philippe. You're in California. Thank you so much for being with us.
And
as we're
and
going
a shout out
today.
to Karen Ruiz, I see from California. A shout out to Karen Ruiz over in the Central Valley. So thank you so much. And to all of the others. We know you don't want a roll call of names, but some of them I see more often than others. So thanks to all of you for participating today.
Absolutely. And kind of continuing in that same vein that we've been doing over the past this will be the third webinar in the Moving Up series. What we're trying to do is, because we do know that many of you are working with a combination of adult basic education students as well as GED level students. So, you know, we're trying to look at that student who's kind of in between, and we really have to do something to push them on up a little bit further. So we're not going to be doing our normal extended response. Let's talk about that. We're going to talk about some other things as well. So we're going to talk about some challenges that students have in writing. We're going to review strategies and activities that you can use in order to help students. We're going to look at a process for students to learn how to use evidence in writing. But again, we're not going to the extended response. We're just trying to get them ready to be addressing some of those. And as always, we have resources to share with you. So for those of you who have been with us for the last two sessions, the one in December, the one in January, we talked about the fact that in GED Ready, you know, we have those three different score levels. And as students take GED Ready, they're hitting into these different levels, and it's like, okay, what do I need to be doing to help them move? And especially we want to talk about those students who are in that too close to call area. So we want them to be able to start moving on up. But what does it mean that they're really too close to call? Well, the thing about those students stuck right in that middle is that most of the time they have an they're not able to maintain consistency in demonstrating skills. So they might be able to answer something, say, dealing with subject verb agreement in one place, but then they turn around and in another they're not recognizing it. So the other part is that maybe they can handle some of the lower level material, the less complex material. But when you get into things that are a little more complex, they don't have as much success with that. So we want to get them to move. And what do we mean when we talk about consistency? Well, if they're in that not likely to pass, they're very inconsistent. But if they're too close to call, they'll get things like they'll perform things okay about 50% of the time, 70% of the time. But Lord knows we don't want them to be in that situation where sometimes yes, sometimes no. So we want to work on doing something with that. So as we take a look at RLA, we've spent a lot of time over the past couple of years talking about the extended response specifically. But there are some other things that we need to be doing, and I'm sure that some of you are seeing some of these things as we go through. But I just want to highlight a couple of things because these are going to be the things that we work on within this. And if you notice off of the PLD, remember those performance level descriptors, there is a whole section in here that talks about applying knowledge of English language conventions and usage. And I know that for some of you who love all that grammar stuff, this is going to be a treat for you as you go through. But we really do have to get our students understanding what the rules are and being able to apply those when they're writing. The other thing is we are going to talk about evidence, but we're going to talk about it a little differently than the way that we normally do. So those are going to be our two primary areas as we start moving through the process. So before we do that, though, we just have to have these. We have some poll questions. And so what I want to do is have you respond to a couple of these. And so they're going to pop up on your screen. You're going to make your selection. And I want to see how many of you have students who struggle when it comes to reach that likely to pass area. How many of you have students who are in that range? And so I see we're getting off to a pretty good start. We have almost 34% of you who have already voted now as we're going through. And so we'll give it a few more seconds, keep on climbing. We really want to know what all is going on with your students. And we're just shy of 70% of you voting, so there we go. Yay! So I'm going to give it just about 3 more seconds, make those last votes, and I'm going to close the poll. And at this point, I want to share the response with you. 87% of you say, yeah, I have students who are in that particular situation where they are struggling to reach that likely to pass. All right, let's dig a little bit deeper if that's the case. And let's take a look. I'm going to hide that. I'm going to come to another poll question and ask this one of you. I want you to think about your class. Are there a number of, basically look at the statement. In my class, there are a number of students who lack proficiency in basic writing skills. I'm not talking about getting up there and being able to write essays. I'm just talking the basics. And it looks like a lot of people have the hang of this voting now. So because you're coming up on the percentages much faster than you did on the last one. So I'm going to give it about 3 more seconds. And I'm going to close the poll and let's share out the results. Debbie, this is really interesting as we look at all this, is that we have 92% of the teachers here today are saying that their students lack proficiency in basic writing skills. That says to me,
True,
and I would assume to you as well, that we have quite a ways to go with a large group of students that we're trying to get through. What's your thoughts?
Well, I agree, and I don't think any of us are surprised at this answer, but these are the kind of answers that help us understand that we are going in the right direction. Very often we worry about how much work we do on RLA, and this answers the question. It's a direction we all need. We're all looking for new ideas and fresh ideas and different strategies and ways to decode and break it down, because sooner or later, and the things Susan prepares for us are always different with a little different look. And sooner or later, one of these different little ways of looking and strategizing with your students are going to turn that light bulb on. And that's what we're all shooting for. So that's what I see in the numbers.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. And let's take it another step, because here's another issue that we have with our students. And so, true or false? I have students who believe that they won't need writing skills later in life and at work. For them, a big portion of this and the writing that we do in the classrooms, they're looking at this and they're saying, hey, I just have to get through this extended response. I'm not really going to need an awful lot of that as I move on forward. The kind of job I want, it's not going to require that I have these fancy writing skills. But yet the research is really clear, and in research that they've done getting out in the business community, there are a couple of things that have shown up. One of those is the fact that when people are hiring, one thing they are looking at is that student's ability to write, and that future employee is what I should say, that future employee's ability to write. And the other one is that you are more likely to be able to earn a promotion or even be considered for promotion if you have stronger writing skills. So I'm going to close this poll, share the results with you, and you can see 75% of you have students who that is what they believe. And I know that's something that I used to encounter in the classroom quite often. I'm not going to need that. It's kind of like the way they do when it comes to working with algebra. I'll never need that kind of stuff. Well, I'm sorry, but the reality is, yes, you will. And so those are the types of things where we've got to maybe figure out some ways that we can help students better see the importance of those writing skills as they're going through in life and in work. There's more to writing than just taking a test. So I'm going to hide that, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to come back over here to the PowerPoint. So keeping those things in mind, what we want to do in building these better writing skills is we want to model things for students. We want to share with them skills and strategies so that those strategies can be their own, and that they will own those skills so they can apply them in different situations. We want to make sure that we're providing practice. Now, I'm not talking about pages of questions that they have to answer, but different types of practice that they can use. Because what we want our students to do, and we've said this in math, we've said it in reading, is we want them to have confidence plus the skill. It's one thing that, I can do this, but yet the skill's not sitting there. Or to have the skill but not be sure enough to display that and to apply that. So as we move on, we're going to talk about some writing basics. And we're going to talk about some of these things called grammar crimes. But I want to answer a question for me first. And so let me open up a new poll. And here is your question. And I know I'm forcing you into an answer here. But when students enter your class, which of the following do you have to teach most often? Basic sentence structure, mechanics, usage, or writing an effective paragraph? And I know some of you would love to have another answer that says all of the above. And as I'm looking at these different things that are coming through, you know, there's not a tremendous amount of variation among those. The basic sentence structure, yes, that, and writing an effective paragraph, because how are we going to get to an extended response if we can't get a paragraph going? But those are the kinds of things that all of us have to work with. So let me close the poll and share the results. And you can see that we have almost 50-50 split here between a basic sentence structure and writing an effective paragraph. But then the rest of you are coming right on in with those mechanics and also the usage. So thank you for sharing that with us, because as Debbie was talking about earlier, there are things that we want to make sure that as we're working with different things that we cover, the things that you're going to need. So let's talk grammar crimes. And there are certain things that we see all the time. And so we're going to call these, you know, it's a crime, but it's a grammar crime. That's what it is. And so there are a couple of things that we've run into. We've run into the issue of word choice with students making some decisions there. We have mechanics that are an issue. That's what 41% of you said as you were responding. We have usage issues, and those get into that pronoun reference and subject-verb agreement. But we also have that sentence structure, fragments, run-ons, and my favorite of all, comma splices. So we're going to go through, and we're going to have a little bit of fun here. So I'm going to show you a slide, and what I want you to do is I want you to tell me, and we're going to start out very easy, what's the grammar crime? And you can pop that right into the question box, and we'll take it from there. So hopefully everyone's ready. And our first one, what is the grammar crime here? It's capitalization. Yes, you are absolutely correct. And this is one of those things outside of the letter I, which we see so much as we're going through. This is something students have difficulty with because they're not exactly sure what they should be doing. So yes, we have capitalization is the problem. Okay, you're good. Let's try another one. What is the grammar crime? Wrong word choice. Absolutely. And I see that people are picking out that effective should have been affective instead. And somebody brought up the comment that that's tricky for English language learners. You're absolutely correct. So as we're going through, kind of keep those things in mind. We're going to go through a few of the, actually quite a few of these as we work through the process. And I want you to think about for your classroom, how about each day if you posted a sentence, you know, you could put it on your smart board, you could put it somewhere in the room as people come in, and the whole thing, and put sticky notes next to it or little pieces of paper. Everybody coming in has to look at the sentence and figure out what's wrong with this. And then as they go through, at some designated time, you bring the whole class together and say, okay, let's talk about the grammar crime of the day. What was it? What's wrong with it? Those are the things that we can do that put things in a little different perspective rather than having a whole sheet of, oh, let's just work with homonyms or homophones or do something along those lines. Let's look at it from a standpoint of providing different types of grammar crimes where students are having to think and use the skills that they have. Okay, what's this one? And boy, do we see these. Yes, it is an apostrophe, but what is it specifically? Somebody got it. Possessive nouns. Absolutely. These are the other kinds of things that if you think about it, what would this look like as someone is writing, say, a little description for applying for a job? They're telling a little bit about their lives and they leave out or put in the wrong place those apostrophes because they don't know how to use possessives itself. So let's try another one. What's the grammar crime? We have to decide whose instead of whose. We have to say who is going. So yes, we have a problem when it comes to spelling with contractions and students not using those completely. Okay, now we have a big question for you. Put on your thinking caps. How many punctuation marks are there? Oh, not in that particular question. How many are there actually out there? We know we have question marks and periods, and we have all these different ones. How many? And thank you for somebody taking on that question with one, because yes, you saw one punctuation mark. I have from Jean. I have many, lots of different punctuation marks, and I'm getting a lot of different responses here. I have 6 and 8 and 11, 12. Anywhere else?
They're getting warmer.
Oh, I love this. I love it. Oh, Yolanda Edwards, you are absolutely right. Cheryl Hoffman, so are you. And I love Gerald Fox. What a great way to answer it. You just put all these different punctuation marks out there. Yes, there actually are 14. And we don't think about many of these different things that are there. But here is one thing that you can do with students where you have a chart, just shows the different punctuation marks, shows an example, and then they can kind of work from there. And which ones are they comfortable with? Do they know how to use certain ones as they go through? I know I'm guilty, especially on certain things, of maybe overusing an ellipsis, because sometimes it just feels like it really works, and even though I probably should just be doing 2 complete sentences and go from there. But just something to share with you, kind of a fun thing. Okay, let's go back to grammar crimes. What is the problem? Too many commas. Absolutely. Every one of us knows these students who come in, and the more commas, the better. So we've got to work on our students so that we don't have what they call comma overuse. I know the way that students really look at things is like, oh, if I pause somewhere or take a breath, I'm supposed to put a comma there. And we all know that students, basically, if you're trying to read these kind of sentences, you're going to hyperventilate before it's over with. Okay, let's try another one. It needs a comma. You're absolutely right. We've got two independent clauses here. So we should be going, Nathan went to the local supermarket, comma, and he bought soup and crackers for supper. Doesn't sound like very much for supper, but that's okay. But that's another thing that we can work through. Missing a comma. All right, let's try another one. Oh, yeah. That first one needs a comma, absolutely. And where does that comma need to go? I do see somebody saying, it's introductory elements. And yes, you are absolutely right. It should go between Timothy and Nancy, because otherwise, she was across the room from Timothy. Nancy could see his warm smile. What are you trying to say? And also we have in a memo to her staff, comma, yes, Doris informed them of her retirement plans. These are the types of things where we want to make sure that students have a sense of consistency. There are different ideas out there. Well, if it's only one word, then we don't necessarily have to have a comma after it. But to keep it consistent, if there's an introductory element, what we want to do is make sure that students put that comma and that they always use that comma. That will make things much easier for them. How about this one? I see where people are saying that it needs two commas. And I also saw where someone came through and said it's in a positive. In other words, we're adding additional information in there, and so we need to offset it by commas. Got another one. What's the student doing in that very first one? It is subject verb agreement, absolutely. But what are they using as their subject in this one? Places, absolutely. Because they're not looking that here we have this interrupter between. So we have the climate are. No, climate is. But the student is looking at the word places. When we take a look at the next one, neither Mary nor her brothers knows what happened. So these are the kinds of things that we really need to work on with our students. Here's another one. Same kind of thing, where we have, it's actually talking about the teacher, but she sounds a lot like all of you. She's working on so many things, adult ed, alternative ed, and ESL. And absolutely, I had a comment just come in, and I think it's an important one for us to talk about. And this is from Scott, who says, they want to write like they speak. And that is true, that we do see that, and that they need to learn those little nuances that we have. Okay, let's shift over out of subject verb. And what is our problem here? Pronouns. Absolutely. But what kind of pronoun is this? It's not necessarily pronoun, well, we can call it pronoun agreement, but we are pronoun shift. Thank you very much for that. It's the reference that's being made. If one wants something important out of life, you must get it. You've got to make a choice here as to which one you're going to be using. Let's try one more. Who got the degree? In this one, Shelley, you are absolutely right that it's very ambiguous. I don't know if Samantha was thanking Geraldine when Samantha got her degree, or if it's Geraldine that actually ended up getting the degree. Everything is too ambiguous. So I have to make sure that I'm truly pointing out. And sometimes with these types of things, students have to just use use the person's name rather than going to a pronoun. Oh, this is one that our students, and I'll just quickly do this one, where we have the agreement with the antecedent. When writing an essay, everyone performs at the best of their ability. So we have a split between that everyone and their. Let's take a look at another. We're going to shift out of pronouns now. What is that? It is a fragment, absolutely, but it's kind of long. And so sometimes our students look at this and say, well, it has a subject and a verb in it. It is a fragment. This is because she was new in town and had not met any of her neighbors, you're sitting there going, okay, what comes next? So we have a sentence fragment. I bet you recognize these very quickly. And in this particular one, what do we have? It's a run-on, absolutely. Those two things, the fragments, the run-ons, are things that we keep seeing all the time. And next, my favorite. Oh, yes, Joanna, thank you very much. Yes, it is a comma splice. And that is one thing, if nothing else along the way, I have learned is all about comma splices. So, very quickly, for those of you who recognize this comma splice, tell me 3 things you could do to change that, correct it so that we don't have a comma splice. What could you do? I got a semicolon. I could put the and in there. And, Peter, you are absolutely right. I could just make it 2 sentences. I don't have to have this one longer sentence. I could make it 2 shorter sentences. So, very good. See, y'all are great on all this. Think about what your students and the conversations you could be having in class if you spent a little bit of time each day. It wouldn't need to be that much time, 5 minutes or so, taking on some of these grammar crimes and having students solve them. They're using their understanding, their knowledge about different mechanics and usage, the basics in sentence structure. They're different things they're learning, but they're doing it in a fun way and something that's just a little out of the ordinary. So, what about this one? Anything wrong with that? I like to listen to music. I like to watch movies. I like going swimming too. Eh. But that's one of those things where I'm going to have to watch as I go through to make sure that I keep it parallel. Absolutely. Helen, thank you so much for this. I do. I have different verb forms that are sitting in here. So, one more. What was driving? Was it the car that was gentleman was driving, or is that tree? And I love the second one, running down the street. The house was on fire. So we have a house that's running down the street. These, yes, absolutely, everyone. These are dangling modifiers. And you can find thousands of these things out there, and they are so much fun. One thing you might want to consider as you're doing something with this is you could actually have, and I've done this in a workshop before, you can actually have students who draw a picture of what's going on to reflect what is really being said with a dangling modifier. And then they can make corrections after that. But I've seen, not everyone can draw very well. I'll be the first to tell you I can't. But for students, this is one way to really get it across that you want to make sure that they know that that tree is not driving or that that house is not running down the street. So think of activities that you can do that would really help students as they're moving through with some of these. Now, how many, I'll just ask this and you can just raise your hands for me. How many of you have actually used the RLA study guide? You've shared it with your students. It's on the GED website. I'm not seeing, I'm seeing a couple of hands that are going up. Keep in mind that in the back section of that, you actually have a number of pages that are devoted specifically to grammar and language. And so that can be an example for you. We'll go through it. It is one of the handouts. And I know someone earlier said, can we get the handouts? Absolutely. You can download them while you're online, while we're doing this. If you look over to the side where you saw the question little arrow, you can see an arrow that says handouts. And there are 3 of them under that. There is today's PowerPoint. There's the study guide for RLA, and also that PLD, that Reasoning Through Language Arts performance level descriptors. Now, if you can't get it to work while you're on the line itself, then what I would recommend to you is that you download this when Tico, who handles all this for us, she's going to be posting this online on the GED.com website. And so you'll be able to just go in and download it from there. And usually it's a few days afterwards because we have to convert the audio and video, those types of things. But it is something that you can use. And Scott says, I already did the download. Great. Fantastic. So hopefully you have those materials. And again, as I said, if you look at the very back, and if we have time today, we'll go take a look at that. You can see the pages where it references different usage mechanics and so on that students encounter on the test. So here's something else. Just write for the fun of it. For our students, many of them, and especially those who are in that mid to little upper ABE or adult basic education, they really have such fear of writing because they've not been very successful with us. So I want to make sure that as you're going through that you think about every now and then, just do something for the fun of it. So you're going to do something for the fun of it. See, I got you working up a storm today as we're going through. So sometimes, we always have that thing that a picture is worth 1,000 words. Well, I don't want 1,000 words by any means. But I want each of you to just pick out one of those nature photographs and write a sentence about it. And I'll be quiet here so that you can write your sentences. Put them into the question box. Oh, April, I love your sentence. The rain pummeled the delicate white flowers. And Stephanie, the sunset colored the sky many shades of orange. Wow. Debbie Fawcett, we got some real writers out here.
I know. I'm enjoying reading. We've got a great number of examples of some wonderful descriptive sentences. However, I think everybody who's writing these wonderful descriptive sentences knows that's not exactly what you're going to get when you ask your students.
That is very true. However, we could get them moving there if they knew that it wasn't going to be a, oh my goodness, somebody's going to mark all this up. Let's get the ideas out there. I see Laura goes, as I take a deep breath, I feel alive and alone in a vast world. Wouldn't you love it if we could get students writing like this? This would be absolutely fantastic. And sometimes, I know I've seen it with students, is sometimes they end up being able to do this when they're so afraid of some other things. If they can just think, what are you seeing in that photograph? What does it remind you of? And, don't worry about the comma splice. Don't worry about whether or not that should have been a semicolon. Let's just listen to what the words have to say. And then we can slowly building this. Oh, George, thank you so much. While visiting the Misty Mountains, I almost fell asleep and fell off the cliff. Y'all are so great. You've got such great imaginations as you're going through and you're working with these. But this is something, again, it is a short, sweet writing activity. Because students, when they think they have to write a paragraph, oh my gosh, how am I going to write a paragraph about all this? But you ask them to write a sentence, that's not so bad. And then you can have that time where they share. And there is nothing greater than Google Images to go in and actually pull some image, or maybe you have something that you've done. I may not be the best photographer in the world, but there's things that every now and then I do. So there's things that you can do from that. Make it fun, because if they're having fun, it's going to make a difference. Okay, so let's skip on to our next part, and I want to talk about evidence-based writing, just the getting started part. Moving students from I think, I feel, I believe into being able to write about what they've read. Take a look at this. If someone asks you why you bought or rented the home in which you live, you might say, it was the perfect location. It fit my family's needs. It had a wonderful kitchen and great room. It was in the right place at the right price. Did you just give reasons, or did you give evidence? Joanna, absolutely. You gave reasons. This is the reason why. Now, if you were going to convince me that I should buy or rent in that same area, I would have to go a lot further than that. I would have to dig down into that and start talking about why that location was perfect. How do I know that location's perfect? Well, it's close to schools. It was close to where my job is. It was a quiet neighborhood. There are any number of things that you could do. But what students do when they're writing, especially at the mid and upper ABE levels, is they give us a lot of reasons. They don't get into the evidence. And as Scott said, they don't get into those details. So there are things, and as I was looking here, we have one where it says, that we need to take a look at, having something that's, more than just 6 words, as we're going through. So, you need to rent from the Wild Oaks. Their kitchens have ample counter space. That gives us evidence, not just a reason, but evidence as we're looking through. So how do we get there? Take a look at that. Now, is that going to make you jump up and down and say, yeah, hey, I'm joining the carpool tomorrow? But what about this? I think somebody told me I was going to spend 35% less on gas than in the previous year, I might start taking a serious look at carpooling. The difference between this and this is that we have evidence. We didn't just have a reason. I can say I can save money, but yeah, prove it to me. Show me. How much money are you going to save? This is what we want to do. So here's your task right now. This is a survey that they do nationwide on the best grocery store in the U.S. And this is Wegmans, which any of you who are up in the Northeast, you probably know and love Wegmans. It unseats Trader Joe's as the best grocery store in the U.S. So just read through and take a look at what they had to say about it. I know because I have spent some time in doing professional development up in the Northeast. I know that the people who have Wegmans love it, absolutely love it, and they can't say enough about the grocery store itself and how wonderful it is. And actually, I've been in there a couple of times. Never was able to get in there and roam around the way that I wanted to. But I wanted you to take a look at this because here's this survey, and it comes back and it says that as we're going through, you have a claim. And that claim said, okay, now click, that Wegmans is the best grocery store in the U.S. And it gave reasons. It's large stores, employee training, yada, 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 and went on from there. But did this really give any evidence beyond that? Do we know a comparison of the stores? Do we know about employee training? Do we know about fresh produce? Okay. The reason why I gave you that is it lays out the reasons, it gives it the claim itself within this couple of paragraphs. But what is lacking is it's lacking the evidence. And that's the thing that makes a big difference when you're trying to convince somebody of something. And when students are ready to move over to that extended response, as they're going through, they're going to have to use logical reasoning and relevant evidence so that they can back up the claim that they've made. But our students aren't ready for that yet. There's reading skills and analysis and evaluation that they're not quite there at that particular point in time. But we can start the process by looking at something called what, why, how. And I have to give all of the credit for this one to Steve Piha. He has a website. It's listed at the bottom, Teaching That Makes Sense. He has absolutely incredible resources for reading and writing that can be used. And he has so many of the materials that are just free to download. But he set up a chart here where we have what is the claim, why is that claim made, and then how. How do they know? So if you take a look at that, you're going from the claim to the reasons, and our students can do this, but now let's get them to move into the next piece, which is what's the evidence that backs that up? I'm going to share one with you. In this particular one, the claim came back, and we want to know, the question was, why was Wegmans selected as the favorite grocery store? And they said it was large stores, employee training, fresh produce, reasonable prices, customer experience. But what was missing in there is the how do I know? How do I know that? If I were going to be going and making a decisions between let's see, a Publix, an Ingles, a Wegmans, a Trader Joe's, or whatever, and one of the things was large stores, how could I convince someone that Wegmans was the best when it came to this? Well, my evidence, it has a lot of different departments, the square footage, spacious so nothing feels all crammed up. That's the evidence that you could use backing up large stores. What about employee training? Well, they have an initial orientation. They have ongoing training. It's the consistency of service. All of those different things could then back up my reason for why employee training comes out as one of the top ones. Now, your task. What kind of evidence could I use to prove something about the fresh produce? Just type it into your question box. What could I use? And I know you're not, unless you actually lived up there. I see from Jean, no dated materials. Let's get back down here. Produce delivered daily. Examples, locally grown. That they give out samples. That the produce is purchased from local growers. That it's ripe fruit, there's no mold, there's seasonal fruits and veggies. Absolutely. All of you are absolutely on the mark with this one. What you're doing is you're providing the evidence for that. And you've gone much further than even I did. Local providers, wide variety, excellent condition. If you notice as I'm moving through this, now I have things I could actually write about. I could actually go through and I could do a couple of sentences on the fresh produce. I could go through and do some sentences on employee training. What I could do with this now is actually begin to write a paragraph or do a couple of paragraphs about why this particular store has been listed as the favorite. What, why, how. And if we can do this with things that students know, so much the better. The question that I asked earlier, or I wrote the statements about why did you rent, or why did you buy a given house, why did you buy a certain car? Debbie, you bought a car, what, a year ago, something like that?
About a year and a half ago. Yep.
Okay. What was one of the reasons why you got the car that you got?
So I wouldn't be driver shamed in the old car that I drove around in. But the other ones, the reasons. You would know that by watching me drive the car down the road. But the other reasons, in all seriousness, it does have to be, it is a comparison of the appointments to the car, the utility of the car that I needed of an SUV versus a sedan, and for what purposes I needed the car, for the options I had in the car for carrying things, and of course it's the price point, also the color. But those are just some of the things that make a difference for me when I chose a car.
So as she's going through, there were certain things that Debbie wanted to see within that car. And so as she went through and she wanted to talk about price point, well, she could look at, and if someone were saying, well, yeah, but how do I know that really was a good price point? Well, I compared prices with other things. I looked online, there's a number of different things that you could do. This is how we get students to bring their own personal experiences in and take them beyond a reason to get them to say, okay, how could you convince someone else that your stand is correct? And you do that through evidence. So this is something that you can take in and work with students. And I'll share with you one of the things that actually we did have happen in some training is that you put this into as many real life situations as you can so that they're just used to the idea of taking something which is their opinion, but then backing it up with evidence itself. And as you go through, you can move from more complex situations and into different types of articles. Because students talk about, will I ever use this in real life? Well, yeah, we have to use it within the test itself, but we see this in editorials. We see it in other letters as we're going through. And, of course, there we sit with Perry Mason. These are the types of things that we want to do. I will tell you that working with one of the programs that I was working with out there is that they actually had their students come in and basically their claim or their question was, their claim basically was, I am the best person for this position. And then they wrote down reasons. And then after the reasons, the students actually came back and they had to put in, how would you prove that to someone that was interviewing you? And what teachers told us afterwards is that what they saw from that is that students would actually carry those things around with them because they had their chart. It worked great for when they had to fill out an application, if they were going in for an interview, because they had already thought through why I would be the best employee. And so, they weren't just, well, I can handle the job. Because what we would not want to see is we wouldn't want to see something like this. Attached, please find me resume, as I would love, all caps, to be a lifestyle Wall Street intern, as both topics fascinate me and I have great experience in both. The only caveat is I have to do this during non-working hours. Fear not, as I am willing to work well into the night to get clips and additional experience in writing. Please let me know if you have any questions. Oh, no. This person isn't going to be interviewed as an intern because there's no, I see from Scott, too much texting. Yes, there is that point in there, but there's so many other things that are wrong within this. So you could take something like this and you actually could have students make corrections to it. Or how about this one? My name is Jay Harden, and I'm an interested applicant in the position currently available. My skills consist of being great at multitasking, great with computers, patient, bilingualism, fluent Spanish, reliable, and having very flexible hours. Whew. I am 24 years old, which is why I think this position is a great fit for me. I have attached my resume in the hopes of being considered for it. I am available weekdays, weekends, and at any time nights. Thank you in advance for your time reading this email. Should you choose to move forward, please do not hesitate to contact me via email. Well, at least this is a little different from the one at the top. However, how would I know that you're great at multitasking? If I'm an employer, how would I know you're great with computers, that you're patient, reliable? That's where students need that next step of how could I prove it? Scott, you're absolutely right. There are no examples. I'm great at multitasking. I have been working multiple jobs, yada, 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 and can go on from there. But you could use what, why, how for this. So let's go one more step. And I know my computer is a little bit slow in bringing over to the next one. So, applying for jobs. Here's a bunch of stuff I've written down and explain why I'm awesome and you should like me and give me money. I'm an amazing robot/person. Have students create a what, why, how chart that addresses why they would be the right candidate for a job. Have students identify 3 to 4 reasons. Have them provide evidence. And their last step is to create a cover letter. Those are the types of things that we can do with students to help build that skill. We're building writing skills. We're building that ability to think through the process. We're increasing their ability to understand what evidence is and how we use it. You can move on from there, start with a question, and you can see we have lots of different questions. And just to bring up what Scott said a few minutes ago about cell phones and texting and those types of things, but you ask the students to take a position. It's their opinion. They're not reading something at this stage. Extended response on the test, they're going to have to read something and respond to that. But this is they're taking what their own thoughts are, state their reasons, provide the evidence. This is how you start working with students. Then you can make the next move where they start writing about what they've read. This is just a short excerpt. This is not the entire article from Newsella, but what's money? It's what's in your wallet. What apps are on your smartphone? And so students can take that next step. Are wallets going to be a thing of the past because everything will be done on your smartphone? Think about how you could use that within the classroom. So if you haven't used Newsella, please consider doing so, because for one thing, since you're working with multiple levels of students, you actually can go in and change this around. So if you needed a level 6, that's fine. If you needed it at a little lower level, that's fine as well. But assign the appropriate levels of the article to students based on their ability. They're all reading about the same topic. Have them read the first paragraph and find the claim. What is being claimed within this article? Then they find the evidence to support that claim. And then they can write a brief summary and show how that evidence supported what the claim was. See, we're still not going into making an evaluation on this, but we are beginning at this point, after we've gone through what, why, how. Now we're beginning to go through and start looking at this from a standpoint of responding to what someone else has written. So with our students, you don't have to see the whole staircase just to take the first step. But what we can do is very simply move through a process where we're expanding out. After students have worked with this, it's a really good time for them to then begin to work with some of those higher level texts. So I have this chart. Some of you have seen this before, I'm sure. But what we want to do is we want to take our students from struggling writers to successful. And you have all pointed out different ways that we can do that, and we've gone through and we've looked at grammar crimes, we've looked at nature one-liners just to get them comfortable writing. We've looked at what, why, how. And now we can look at some of the other things about responding to something that they've read about. So keep those things in mind as students are building skills. Remember, you can't do this overnight. It is a process as you're moving through. So just a last couple of little things that I'm going to go through, just a few resources. Please take advantage of the GED.com site, because you've got all kinds of things that are available there. For your students who are at the higher level, don't forget, there's those extended response videos that are sitting out there. And if you're going to need source text, remember these, the sample responses for classroom practice, that's for your higher level students. Keep in mind Newsella, because there's so many different topics. that you can use. So at this point, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take a look. Okay, from Gerald, I've got what, why, how went by kind of fast. Did I miss something? What do you think? Why do you think so? How do I know? Actually, you really got it. It's really about what do I think or my claim, why do you think so, my reasons, and then how do I know becomes my evidence. And so all of you can get access to the PowerPoint itself, and you have all of this that's included in there. The other thing that I will have, I'll go through and make sure that we put this in so that you can easily, as you download the webinar itself, the writing component of it, the handout, you'll be able to see all those different pieces. So having said that, Debbie, let's see if we got some questions.
All of the questions that you see are very near the end. I will go back to a comment that was made earlier, but here is one from Renee Cox. What is a simple way to explain opinion versus fact? And I'm happy to take that one if you want to.
You go right ahead.
Okay, and we do, one of the basic things in all of our presentations when we're talking about evidence, we talk about the different types of evidence, and a type of evidence, or a couple of things, are factual data or statistics. But so many of our students think data and statistics are the only type of facts. They are two of the types of facts. You know, we talk about logical reasoning and a number of other things, but the way I try to talk to students about it is, if you're having to prove something, you're going to need your data and your statistics. That's proof. That's a more solid case than just asking for evidence, because evidence is a little looser definition. It is not absolute proof, but it is evidence of why you believe this fits in to help you with your claim. And those are the items. Susan, you know, I always like to fall back to you and say anything else I need to add there. But to me, that's the difference between, you know, fact and evidence, and then opinion versus fact is when you're bringing your own knowledge into it. That is an opinion rather than finding the words on the written page that will make you decide a pro or a con and which side you can better support. Susan, did I muddle that up enough?
No, that was just fine. What I tell students when I take a look at opinion versus fact, if I walk outside and I say, wow, it feels cold out here, okay, that's my opinion. But if I say, wow, it's 28 degrees. First one, I gave an opinion. It feels cold out here. The second one, I actually gave a fact. I said it's 28 degrees. So, you know, it can be as simple as that when you're working with students, but, you know, opinion really is your thoughts and your feelings on something. Facts are those indisputable pieces. Like Debbie said, some of the strongest pieces we always have are those things which, you know, have data to back them up. But, you know, kind of keep those things in mind. And I see from Larry, we have a do you teach 5-paragraph essay form to teach writing? And Larry, I will tell you that no, I don't. And I don't for a specific reason. Students, I'd like for the ideas to drive the structure of writing as opposed to a structure driving the writing. So what happens too many times with students is they have an introductory paragraph, they have another paragraph that is pretty good, you know, and then they do a second one, and then they go to, well, now they're down to the third paragraph. Then they go to the fourth one, and they're not quite sure what to write, so they kind of mish together the second and third, and then they conclude it. And so they would have stronger writing if it were just 4 paragraphs. So what I try to do with students is I try to go at it from the standpoint of that our students do better if they're given, if they have a beginning, they have a middle, and they have an ending. And that middle might be 3 paragraphs or it might be one. The main thing is that they make their points clearly. And so sometimes when the pressure comes off from trying to fill 5 paragraphs, they actually do better. I've seen a lot of really good 3-paragraph essays, and I've seen some really bad 5, 6, 7 paragraphs because they kind of started rambling around. And Scott made a good point here. Eyewitnesses are providing facts by perspectives and observations. Absolutely. And let's see, with Ashley.
I've read Ashley's.
Okay.
If you want me to go over that,
Go
Ashley,
right
I think
ahead.
what you're asking with the real world, with the real world writing, you're wondering if the GED extended response is ever going to cover topics like resume and cover letter writing, or will it still be the standard extended response? I am not aware. The reason for the standard extended response is so that we can show that a student can write from text-based writing, can find evidence and do text-based writing. That is not what we would have in resume writing or cover letter writing. I have not heard any inclination to change the extended response because of the thinking, critical thinking skills, problem solving, and close reading. That's all measured and part of the entire paradigm for the test. So, Susan?
Absolutely. That's absolutely right, because if you take a look at it, this provides a closer structure, but also when you know that within these samples, when they have to read the different texts, that there's certain evidences provided there. It's much more structured than what you would see if you were looking at the resume and the cover letter. What I like to see is that we not only teach that extended response that we do for the test, but that we teach students those other forms of writing, because the reality is that students still need to be able to use evidence. They need to have good sentence structure, whether they're doing real life writing or they're preparing for the test. So it's all about the skills that they're learning. So if you can have them do that, resumes, cover letters, if they can go in and you can have them write, whether it's short stories. We have some students who are fantastic when it comes to writing poetry. My feeling is that the more we can get them to write and the different types of things we can do, the better that it's going to be. And so, George, I'm going to ask you, you mentioned a PEAL format. Could you type in and explain a little bit more about those letters, PEEL, for everyone? Oh, Ashley, Debbie, let's answer this question.
Absolutely.
Is the extended writing still not graded under 300 words?
The extended writing has never been graded based on the number of words. Never. What we found in the early days were the teachers were more concerned about the wording. We never wanted to put out there an indication of how many words had to be placed in there because we didn't want kids counting words. But in deference to educators who felt that it would be helpful to give a guide to students, we did say the writing passages will be 500 to 900 words. And if you want a number for how many words, may constitute a good extended response, we would say 300 to 500. But there is no such grading based on the number of words. It's, did you make the claim? Did you support it? And did you use all the things that are measured for the test? That's what it's graded upon. Now, the reason we put that in there is most students don't write enough to fulfill the requirements. And so that's just a guideline. The 300 to 500 has no marker in the grading process, but it does say there is probably enough of a body of writing that you could get all the important things in if you just had to have an idea of how many words to put there.
And that's such a good point, because as we're going through, just a couple things that you need to keep in mind is that, the students, they have a prompt, and that prompt asks them to do some specific things. And so they need to respond to that. Trying to put it in 100 words or less is not going to get them any points. It's still graded. In other words, the computer does go through and do the process. It just doesn't earn anything because it can't respond to the prompt. There is no count on the number of paragraphs. We have seen writing from students in the samples that they give us and that they have been provided on the GED website that are great, and they're 4 paragraphs. And we've seen these long, convoluted things that really don't go anywhere. So that's the thing that you need to keep in mind. That extended response focuses on evidence. So the prompt itself gives them two different articles to read. They're on the same topic. Then they have to write based on what they've read. I have another one here. Some students ask how much spelling really counts. We went through today, and what you saw was some of the things that deal with spelling. It's about using the correct word. It's about those contractions. It's about the possessives. It's really not about did I spell everything correctly, but it's about usage more than anything else as we're working through with students. So we have students who, and you can see this as you look at some of those samples, their writing is not the greatest in the world when it comes to spelling, but as long as you can still understand it, not a problem. And one other thing, I want to share this because George made a really great point here a little while ago. He said he uses the PEEL method. And so the PEEL, P-E-E-L, so P is for make your point, E, back it up with evidence, E, explain how the evidence supports your point, and then L, link this point to the next point in the following paragraph. So that's a really great way to look at different things. So again, P-E-L. So peel, just like an orange peel.
Yeah.
What makes this computer give 0 score on the extended response? Actually, it's not really the computer that gives it. It's the student who earns it. Because as you're going through, and this is something that, and looking at a lot of the questions here, maybe, Debbie, what we need to do is look at maybe our next webinar coming up with the electronic scoring tool.
Mm-hmm. That's what I was thinking as I look at some of this. Yeah. The couple of these are pretty quick to answer, and Gerald, we're trying to give you the right answer, but we have an entire session where we talk about all the things that we see in the scoring tool. It's anything from not writing enough, not using the full amount of time, and then as Susan says, if we walk you through that electronic scoring tool, you'll understand exactly what they must do to get and what they do to get to earn the 0. I think it's really important. Someone else has asked a question about will the prompt always be the pro and con? And yes, we do not. I've not heard of anything in the prompt changing. The basis of the extended response is argumentative writing. I mean, it's the bottom line. Can you look at 2 articles? Can you determine where the evidence is? And can you determine the evidence, just the things that Susan has gone through? And then can you make a claim and tell how you support it with evidence? We do not see that changing. So Let me go back to some of the other questions. Susan, do you have one in the list you want to take on?
Um, do students have to include quotations from the article? And the answer to that is no. And there is no requirement to include a quotation. They can include a quotation if they choose. If something is really important and they want to use that, Barbara, I would only give you one caution on that, is that sometimes students get carried away with quotations the way they do with commas, and then they would just end up writing all of the different things that they have seen in there, so they wouldn't be using their own original text. So that's something that I think that students have to be very cautious with that as they're going through. And I'm going to go over very quickly to .com because Jean Perini just brought up a comment about the samples, and I'm going to pull you over to where this is, and hopefully
While you do that, I'll fill in a couple of comments that on some of the other quicker questions. But what she's saying, Barbara, about using quotations. The test is only scored on the person's original text, and we walk a thin line. People say, "Well, can they use a quote?" Well, yes. Nobody is stopped from using a quote, but and then we get the urban myths out there that say, "Oh, I heard you couldn't use a quote or you'd get a 0. Well, no. We want you to be very careful in not using so many quotes that you don't have enough original text, because the test is scored based on original text, and the electronic scoring engine will pick up when it's just cut and paste, and before you know it, they have nothing but quotes and very little original text. That will lend itself to a 0. Gerald also asked if there was a human element to oversee the computer scoring. Yes, there is. For the less than 1% of the tests that, for some reason, the automated scoring engine cannot find an algorithm, or the wording looks so far off the map they can't find it, those are pulled aside, and they are human read and human scored. So there is always a human element available. And all of the Spanish language speaker tests are human scored because of the language. They are not automated scoring, run through the automated scoring engine. So I hope that hits that one. And let me see if there's another quick one. I think we picked up in a broad, the computer does not look for certain keywords. That is another urban myth out there. There are no keywords we're looking for. I understand, I'm not going to call a name, the scoring. That's great. I'm glad somebody would like to see the scoring. And one last thing, Susan, I'll turn it over to you. They like to extend some of the coworkers tell their students to skip the extended response because they rarely score above 1 point. For many of us on the line, they understand that the extended response is about 20% of the raw score points that could be earned. And when we do the next session on the extended response, you'll understand that where we can look and really hone in on students' ability to pick up at least a couple of points throughout the scoring tool, which would equate to 4 points and 4 points in your raw score is very important. So we understand that there are some that do that. We don't want to shortchange the students on any opportunity to scratch some points out on their test. Susan?
Well, and I'll add just one other thing to the comment about getting, adding those additional points. One thing we have seen over time is the fact that students who don't do the writing at all, they just skip it, they don't always earn the points that they need off of the other parts. Because remember, they're being evaluated on a lot of the writing tools, the things that we would do, sentence structure, those types of things, in the technology enhanced items. So it's important that they know it. But the other thing is that, and I don't want to try to sound flippant or anything like that, although I probably will, which would not be unusual. But I would say that to a teacher who is not going to work on the extended response, that the student is being shortchanged, because that student is going to need those skills later on. And if they earn 1 point, they get 2. If they've earned 2, they get 4. And so this is not just about, the GED is not just about a test and let me get the diploma. For the majority of people who are out there now that are seeking a credential through GED testing, it's about their futures. And if they're going on to technical education, or they're going on to college, or they're going on into the workforce, writing is an essential skill, as we talked about earlier. So kind of keep those in mind. For those of you who, and I assume all of you, actually spend a little bit of time out on the GED website, I have gone under educators and administrators to get to this part, and over here to the side you see these top resources. And I've pulled into free classroom materials. You'll see that there's the computer-based test tutorial, there's the preview for the test, the free practice test, the study guides that I mentioned earlier. And then if I scroll down a little bit further, I will come to extended response, and it has quick tips, scoring tools, classroom practice. And so for those of you who want some of the practice materials, there are 5 different responses here that are 5 text sets, I should say, stimulus material that you can use to practice with students. These are great things to go through and, one model, as we talked about earlier, gives students an opportunity to practice those types of things. The other thing that as you're looking through, and this is what we're talking about as we move into the future here, as Debbie and I were talking earlier, this will be where our focus goes as we move into our next webinar. And it'll be looking at this extended response scoring tool, but more than that, why this is being, these things are, and students are earning such certain points, but also how we use that information and going forward. So kind of keep that in mind. But this is the one, and it's called ER Resource Guide for Adult Educators, Taxation and Revenue. And as this opens up, you will see that there are samples. I don't mean to make any of you dizzy doing this, but let me move over here fairly quickly. It does give you the guidelines. It has the traits that are included in it, but also what I love most is it goes through and it gives you sample responses and why they're scored as they are. If you spend a little bit of time with this particular resource, it can give you a lot of insight into the extended response and the scoring and what students need to be able to do. But having said that, I want to go back just a minute, and I have to find where my stuff is so that I can do that. I want everybody to really keep in mind that as you're working with this, that you really need to, in many cases, go back to where we were a little while ago when we were talking about what, why, how. If you really want to build out your students' skills so that as you move to that extended response, they have an understanding of evidence and what that does and how you connect it back to the reasons. If you do that, you will have very wisely spent your time, and you will see some real growth in what students are able to do. Many of you mentioned in the survey up front that putting paragraphs together was a real issue for many students. Here's how you move past that. here's how you can begin to build those skills of not just, I got a bunch of sentences, but I got a bunch of sentences that connect, and they're purveying a certain idea. So those are some of the things that you need to keep in mind and going through. So, Debbie, do we have any other questions?
Well, we had one person, several, that wanted us to go back over the acronym PEAL. PEAL, making your point. Yeah, PEAL, and I pulled it up from George's offering. PEAL, make your point. P, make your point. E, back it up with evidence. E, explain how the evidence supports your point. L, link this point to the next point in the following paragraph. And if that's too fast for any of you, you can write your questions. We're going to try to get these answered, but you can email us directly, communications@ged.com, or Susan or I, our website, our email address, debbie.fawcett@ged.com. In either way, that they will get to us. And if we didn't answer your question and we don't get to it as we stroll through these, we will try to make sure that we get this. We can answer your questions. So I want to be respectful of everyone's time. I don't see burning questions here now that we can't get to. So yeah.
And what I've done for all of you, if you'll take a look in the chat box, you'll see that you have the P, the E, and the L. So very quickly, if you want to jot any of those things down, you can certainly do that. And we thank George for providing that information to us. And, oh my, how time flies. As we're going through.
Thank you.
This has been fantastic. I thank you, everyone, for participating, for sharing your responses and your fantastic sentences, which I'm going to take some of those and put them into a training. So I really do appreciate all of those very descriptive sentences as you went through on your nature one-liners. But I really do appreciate your time and all that you do every day for students who are out there. And so I'll say goodbye from me, and Debbie, I'll let you close it out.
I will be happy to close it out. Thank you. We love it when we have a discussion with you all that's robust and we think interesting, because it certainly brought a lot of questions, and it is great to know that we have so many people dedicated to moving forward and helping students. We will talk with you in another 2 months, and you have a great rest of your week. Thank you.